Before I give my talk, I would like to credit the first half of it to a writer named Fatima Gadora. The biography of the individual that I will be speaking about was inspired by the snippets that I took from her article. And so as not to give too much away, I'll be sure that it's linked or that to give you all the full name by the end of the lecture. So he was the son of a black Arab and an Abyssinian princess, a couple who had been enslaved after being captured as prisoners of war. Born into slavery and held under the authority and bondage of his master in a community that was plagued by racism, classism, and overall ignorance, he eventually became an emancipated man, cemented in the books of history as a noble and admired trustee of the world he left behind him. He was of great stature, intelligence, skill, and he became elevated as a favored slave of his master. Yet despite being of a relatively high rank and entrusted with the keys to the then treasures of Arabia, he chose the inevitable torture that would come from believing in his own convictions of justice. His name now echoes throughout history as one of the most prominent companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and today his life provides a shining example of the absolute submission of what it means to create an equitable world for all. He called for a society meant to celebrate our differences, not to create means of division and discord because of them. He recognized that his own emancipation was not complete without the emancipation of others, and he leveled the playing field for those even more vulnerable than he was. His journey is one that is rich with lessons that every individual in society can learn from. It is a story of a young man with unyielding perseverance in the face of tyranny and oppression, a story of certainty and faith and of brotherhood that transcends color and material wealth. This icon of history, as I stand today recalling his story to you, is Bilal ibn Rabah. His story is inspired much of my work and the pamphlets you're holding that finally came into fruition today. The local mosque I grew up in is named Masjid Bilal ibn Rabah. If you're interested, you're welcome to visit anytime, especially on Fridays when we have Friday prayer. With that in mind, when I began my internship at Vice Mayor Steve Kay's office last year, I was asked to think about ways to pull in the refugee and immigrant community, how to get them more involved, and what we could do to make Lexington feel more welcoming for them. Data at the time showed that they weren't as involved, and Vice Mayor Kay's office was determined to get better results. Combining my internship, Gaines Fellowship Jury Project, connection to my mosque, campus involvement, and passion for building understanding and love between the different communities I call home, I very much wanted to see a synergy, as Nathan, my former boss, would always use, that's the word he loved to use, between all of them. So to accomplish the mission, I tried my best to put myself in the shoes of those who recently arrived to Lexington as refugees. That is a community that I was very passionate about getting more involved with. And as Jamie mentioned earlier, when I was president of the Muslim Student Association my sophomore year, spearheading the gala introduced me to individuals that I otherwise would never have had the opportunity and the honor to have met. And I wanted something more sustainable, and I was given this amazing task. I wanted something to last longer than myself and longer than the people that were doing it. I wanted something that was visionary and that would last centuries. So I kept asking myself what it was that would get me, if I was a 20-year-old coming from a completely new country into a new one, probably not in the right state of mind, what would get me more involved in my community? Why would I be invested? What would get my parents more involved? And that's when it hit me. Opportunities to an education. Being a college student, I recognized how many opportunities and how much ease a full-ride scholarship gave me. When I entered UK, an institution considered to be highly respectable, I also realized that my parents' lives changed too. I have 3 older brothers, all of them are educated, and a younger sister who's also pursuing an arts degree. I understood the impact that it had on my lineage. This was something that was going to change the course of my children's life and their children and their children. Decades ago, visionaries who came before myself created scholarships, which are considered to be a community investment that resulted in the enrichment and opportunities for individuals like myself to be able to even attend a higher education institution. And here's where I want to pull up a diagram to give you a better visual. Can I have the pointer? That's okay. So this is something that a friend and I came up with when I tried explaining to her why I wanted the Bilal ibn Rabah scholarship to work so badly. This was a result of 3 years, 2-3 years of effort and thinking and mulling over ideas. And finally and eventually, this ended up being the subconscious model that we used to convince donors and community leaders to invest themselves in the Bilal scholarship. So at the top, you could see community investment, what it is that the community is investing in, and the outcome, what the community enrichment would be of that. So community investment is what we choose to invest in as a collective. What happens when we support something truly inclusive? How can we as a community propel inclusivity? Who are the actors and partners that take part in this? In this case, with the Bilal ibn Rabah scholarship, it happened to be City Council, the University of Kentucky, and not just the University of Kentucky, high-ranking administrators, students who work at a grassroots level to ensure that the word got out, professors, friends, visiting college grad students, you name it. Every single person that I asked to be a part of this said yes and said it with excitement because they valued what the scholarship would bring to the community. So we had City Council, UK, and all of the partners within UK that I mentioned, the religious community. And when I say religious, not just the Muslim community, we brought out individuals from the Muslim community, the Jewish community, the Christian community. I'd sat in a meeting recently with different religious leaders who were saying how excited they were about this because they knew the types of conversations that would come out as a result of this. And that is something that I really wanted to see. And the greater Lexington community, people who maybe weren't necessarily tied to any institution, religious or not, higher education or not, they were just amazing people who lived in Lexington and who wanted to see Kentucky become a better place. So when I brought all of these people together, when everybody working together came for the cause of this scholarship, it allows me to point, this scholarship, the impact was amazing. The scholarship itself, we originally had in mind for refugees, as I mentioned earlier. But when you read your pamphlets, it's something completely different. Due to overwhelming community support, the scholarship pool expanded to assisting all institutionally disadvantaged and marginalized groups. And we weren't specific about what that meant in terms of who can receive it. So a lot of question that I get is, do you have to be Muslim? And the answer is no. This is just something that we created and started so that conversations, genuine questions, and anything that people had to bring up as a concern or beyond, or maybe even a suggestion, was incorporated in the scholarship because it's a community effort. It's not one individual. I just happen to be speaking about it today. This is something that everybody came together to begin. So we originally had it in mind for refugees, but due to overwhelming community support, the scholarship pool expanded to assisting all institutionally disadvantaged and marginalized groups, as I said before, and recognition that there was need for institutions that were built with these groups in mind to create a haven of opportunity that recognized their obstacles and their barriers, and they recognize that these two things do not mean that these students have lack of ability. I think sometimes we can get caught up in the rhetoric of what media has to say about those in society who need more assistance than others. These people, they don't work hard enough. These people, they need to pick themselves up off their bootstraps. But the people working on the Bilal Scholarship recognize that some people don't have bootstraps to begin with. And that is one of the most beautiful parts about being able to work with something like this. I've never seen empathy in the same way that I have when I would walk into the doors of philanthropy, for example, and see the smiling faces of Ellie Goodman, Hannah Sims, Mr. Don Witt, and all of the incredible, amazing people who work there. I've never seen empathy like the mosque leaders when I would tell them, hey, there's people who want to talk to you about this. Would you be willing to welcome them? And they'd say, of course. And amazing conversations would take place. because there was no sense of bias. There was no us versus them. It was all about creating opportunity and using obstacles as a means of educating others and allowing for the people who were affected to lead the way for themselves. So now, what's the output? What's the community enrichment in all of this? So at the bottom, what is the output of community investment, what people are investing in, and the outcome of all of that? So the community enrichment of the Bilal Scholarship is that it perpetuates a positive cycle of giving. And I believe that I'm a living example of that. The more doors of opportunity we create for others, the more people give back. Somebody created a door of opportunity for me by creating a scholarship that allowed me to not think about paying back student loans, that allowed me to think about a career far beyond my wildest dreams. I had maybe 2-3 people tell me, like, Hadeel, you could do this, like, let's do it. And I didn't tell them no, because at the back of my head, I wasn't thinking about how I was going to manage paying off my loans, or what it was going to mean to my family when I told them I was picking this major. My father and my mother and my brothers and my sister are all thankfully very supportive people, but I never wanted to burden anyone with myself. And that's another reason why the scholarships were so helpful to me. And also, another community benefit is that it allows for better engagement with our local economy. A more educated population would mean more job opportunities and a truly diversified workforce with enough differing perspectives to serve all working parts of the home we call Lexington, or maybe even Kentucky. Built-in tolerance would also be something that we would see as a more prevalent aspect of our community, as would acceptance. When we create a cohort for these Bilal scholars, when we create a cohort with all of these other amazing inclusive initiatives, we're also saying that we want these individuals to learn from one another, to work with one another, and to strive towards building their own communities of welcome and opportunity. There are even outcomes that I'm probably not saying right now because of the amount of positivity they have. We might not even know maybe till 10, 20, 30 years down the line. And that's something that I'm okay with being beautifully ignorant about. So a few small changes in how we manage our mindset, which affect our personal and professional relationships, can and ultimately will foster a more inclusive and truly welcoming world for all to live in. So I want to point out something here. So what's the student investment in all of this? It's their time, their studying and learning, the projects and initiatives that they're going to have to do as Bilal scholars themselves, Bilal ibn Rabah scholars themselves, peer collaboration, and money. So when we award someone the Bilal ibn Rabah scholarship, as explained, we also tell them that they have to start their own internship. They have to give back to the community in their own way. We're basically going to be mentoring them all 4 years, and we are expecting them to learn from one another, to ask from one another, and to challenge one another. I had the opportunity of being in spaces where I was able to experience the very same thing. So giving back meant for me that I sat on a table with people, asking them what enriched their experiences as UK students, bringing that with higher and senior level officials, and asking them about ways that we can implement that. So that's the student investment, is that they're not just going to be receiving funding, they're also going to be thinking of ways to give back. What's the student output of this? Economic mobility, as I mentioned earlier, advanced career opportunities, because we all know what the data and statistics say about giving somebody the opportunity to learn, community contributions, and also funding things that would assist others in the future. So it matters for each and every single one of us to work towards building an authentic community of curiosity and leadership rooted in optimism, love, and understanding for one another. However, what I've learned in partaking in initiatives that promote inclusivity is that we're the best versions of ourselves when we truly accept the uniqueness and backgrounds of one another's identities. We are the best versions of ourselves when we are given the opportunity and ability to ask for help, and knowing that the response that we are going to receive is compassion. It takes radical optimism to build a community like that, and to feel like you're a part of a community like that. We are the best versions of ourselves when, despite the ups and downs of navigating such a polarized society, we are given the ability to genuinely celebrate one another's triumphs and initiatives. because we all know and understand the background of the obstacles that it took for one another to get to where we are. Thank you. Okay.
I'm just going to leave your mic on.
Okay.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Just the fact that we would be able to create a community that fed off of of students that fed off of one another and their backgrounds and their experiences. So when we were sitting and imagining what this cohort of students would look like, we were also wondering about the different types of conversations that would come as a result of them being with one another. We thought that maybe if we brought a student who, we would look at every application case by case. And then once they were together, we weren't really sure about what the backgrounds would be, but if they were diverse enough, which we truly believe it will be, they would be able to learn from one another's experiences and they would be able to take from one another's questions. And the reason why I say that is because as a Gaines student, I had to be in a cohort for 2 years. And in being in that cohort last year, every single day we had a reading, or every single week we had a reading or a topic that we had to talk about. And so I come from a Muslim, American, Palestinian background, but a lot of my class, I had no other classmate who came from any of those backgrounds at all. I had a few classmates who were from parts of Appalachia. I had other classmates that grew up in Lexington, some that grew up outside of Lexington and came here. So it was very different perspectives, and I realized how much I had learned and how much empathy I subconsciously developed for people from these communities simply due to the fact that I was in a classroom with students that I ended up caring about because I saw them as my peers and as people I learned from. So aside from providing economic benefit to these students, you're also providing the opportunity for them to shatter barriers about one another that they might not even have noticed existed in the first place. Hi.
Where did you grow up, and why did you choose to go to UK?
Awesome, thank you. I grew up in Lexington, and I decided to go to UK honestly because it was something that I was ingrained in my head since I was a kid. I remember being in middle school, and I have 3 older brothers, and all of them went to UK, as did my sister-in-law, who's essentially like my sister. So I wanted to be as cool as they were, and I remember being in high school and thinking, and when they were a part of the Muslim Student Association, I was like, I really can't wait to get to college so I could be a part of MSA. So I thought that's what all the cool kids did, so if I'm being honest, that's what really made me love UK.
Any more questions? Well, yeah. Tell us about being a Rhodes Scholar.
Oh, a Rhodes Scholar. Okay, honestly, I've had so many questions about this, and I never know how to respond because since the day that it was announced, I've been very grateful. It's been a very surprising experience, just the amount of doors that have opened up for me. But I've also feel like I haven't fully processed it yet. I feel like once I graduate, everyone keeps asking me, oh, what are you going to do post-graduation? I was like, oh, I'm moving to Oxford in September. And saying it isn't the same thing as experiencing it. So I don't think it's fully registered yet. But I'm excited for that. And I'm excited that I've already had the opportunity to speak with a cohort that comes from very vast backgrounds as well. So I'm really excited to learn from them, and I think one of the best parts about being a Rhodes Scholar, as everyone says, is the opportunities and connections you make through that. So I'm really excited to learn from everybody in my class.
Have built into this scholarship not only connections with a cohort, but with the greater Lexington community, so that the investment does actually go beyond the students and out into the community to create a more inclusive environment?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, we have. So I think at the bottom of the pamphlet, I could see. Let me see. Oh, it says it's reflective of civic engagement and community service. So the students would be required to do something that gives back to the community and also engages with the community at a very personal level. So I do believe that while they will be on campus and they will be doing things that hopefully benefit students, the entire point is to create that connection between the community and bring it back for other students to learn and for the community to learn from them. Thank you. Jamie, you pick.
All right, we'll go here and up here.
So thank you for an excellent presentation. And I know you shared that you're still mulling over the ideas of the ways in which you'll continue to learn at Oxford. But when you think about yourself 5 years from now, or even 10 years from now, what impact would you like to make on this world? Because I really see you as someone being a global leader
Wow.
and impacting this world in a major and significant way. So what do you see yourself doing in the next 5 to 10 years?
Thank you, Dr. Price. She's always been such a kind person who sees the best in people. Where do I see myself 5 to 10 years from now? Okay, I really don't know, but I know that I want to be at some place where I'm never out of touch with the community that I come from, meaning that there have been a lot of incredible leaders that I've learned from, like Nipsey the Hussle. He's a rapper. I don't know if any of you have heard of him, but he recently passed away. And his life is something that inspired me for very, very deeply, because it didn't matter how much fame and success he got, he always went back to that community to serve them in some way. So I know that whatever I do, I want it to be people-focused, I want it to be community-focused, and I know that I want the input that I begin to come from the individuals that I learned the best from. So whether it's Lexington, Kentucky, or Palestine, hopefully we'll create a synergy between the two or create some better relationships wherever I go with that. But I definitely want it to be people-focused, if that makes sense.
My question is pretty much the same. I was going to ask what your long-term goals were.
Yeah. I want to give honest answers, so I'm saying I don't know because I really don't. But that's pretty much what it is.
I think I saw one last. Do you have a question?
Yeah, just real quickly, could you address a little bit more about how the students are chosen for the scholarship? Are there quotas or?
So we, and I think maybe, well, Mr. Don Woods couldn't be here today, but essentially students would go through an application process, and then there's an interview process, and it's case by case. So depending on one of the questions that students get asked is, what kind of impact do you want to create on campus, or what kind of impact do you see yourself creating in your community? There's questions along those lines. So we we have students apply, and then afterwards we interview them, and that's when we'll select them. That's essentially how it's done. Yeah.
And I saw one more, and then we'll end.
Okay.
What would need to be true of Lexington in 2 or 3 years for you to be excited to move back here?
Wow.
Very good question.
What would need to be true of Lexington for me to be excited to move back here? Well, honestly, I'm being honest when I say this. Like, I really don't know of any other place in the world like Lexington, because even though I went to a majority white high school, I didn't really have people in my class who looked like me. But I still felt like this was my home, because at the end of the day, people were respectful of the fact that I was so strong in my own convictions, and that I was so happy to be who I was. And I feel like leaving the community that's given so much to me and not coming back here would be a disservice to myself. So I know that there is a connection that I'm always going to want to maintain to Lexington. How strong that connection will be will honestly also be dependent on where my family ends up. If they still live here, like, I'll be here more often. If they don't, then I maybe have to be a little more intentional about coming. But it's never going to be a community that I forget, inshallah. It's always going to be something that I'm connected to.